He walked into a small village in Ecuador, looking for another victim. But this time, the mothers were waiting. A flash flood had just ripped open a hillside grave, and inside it, dozens of small bodies. Girls. Some no older than 8. The man they pulled off the street that day would go on to confess to more murders than almost anyone in recorded history. Newspapers would call him the monster of the Andes. And the strangest part of this story isn't what he did. It's what happened to him after. The archive keeps files most people are too afraid to open. Tonight, we open one. Ecuador, 1980. A small town called Ambato. A river breaks its banks after days of rain, and where the water pulls back, it takes the hillside with it. Locals come to look at the damage. What they find instead is a shallow grave, packed with bodies. Girls. Some barely old enough for school. Word spreads through town before police even arrive. And it spreads fast enough that when a stranger is caught trying to lure a young girl away from a market just days later, the crowd doesn't wait for a trial. They drag him into the street. By the time police pull him out of that mob, alive, barely, they have no idea they're holding on to one of the most prolific killers the world has ever recorded. His name is Pedro López. Colombian. Mid-30s. Soft-spoken, according to the officers who first questioned him. At first, he says nothing. Just enough charm to seem harmless. Enough silence to seem like nothing. Then, slowly, he starts talking. And once he starts, he doesn't stop. He tells them about a childhood that reads like the opening chapter of every explanation true crime fans have heard before: abandonment, institutions, years spent surviving on the street from a very young age. But knowing where a monster comes from, doesn't tell you how far he's willing to go. This is where investigators realize they're not looking at a local case. They're looking at a pattern that stretches across an entire continent. Colombia. Peru. Ecuador. 3 different countries, 3 different police forces, 3 different sets of missing persons files that were never once compared to each other. For years, that was exactly the gap López lived inside of. A girl vanishes near a market in one province, a family grieves quietly, without headlines, without a task force. A few hundred miles away, in a different country entirely, the same thing happens again. No shared database. No phone call between departments. No reason for anyone to connect 2 disappearances separated by a border. He didn't need to hide especially well. He just needed the system to stay exactly as fragmented as it already was. When investigators finally lay the timeline out, province by province, country by country, what they see isn't a string of isolated tragedies anymore. It's a map. A single hand, moving quietly across 3 nations, for the better part of a decade. Here's where this case stops looking like other cases. López doesn't just admit to a few murders. He starts drawing maps. Marking locations. Walking investigators, step by step, through burial sites across 3 countries. Investigators dig where he points. And they keep finding remains. By the time the digging stops, authorities have recovered the remains of over 50 victims just in Ecuador alone. López's own count, the number he gives police himself, climbs past 100. Then past 200. Then past 300. If even a fraction of that number is accurate, it would make him one of the most prolific serial killers ever documented. For years, across 3 countries, young girls had been vanishing from markets and rural paths. Families assumed the worst but had no name to attach to their fear. López's method, according to his own confession, relied on approaching children in public places, gaining their trust briefly, then luring them somewhere isolated. Because his victims were often from poor, rural communities, many disappearances were never even reported to authorities who had the resources to connect them. Which is exactly why he was able to move between 3 countries for years, without ever being caught. Somewhere in this story, buried under the scale of it, there's a single family. One of the girls recovered near Ambato had a mother who, for years before the flood ever exposed that hillside, had never accepted the silence she'd been given by local police. No body. No suspect. No file that anyone seemed to be actively working. She kept asking. Kept showing a photograph to anyone who'd look at it. Kept returning to a police station that had long since moved on to other cases. When the grave was finally uncovered, she was one of the people standing at the edge of it. Investigators would later say that the pressure from families like hers, the refusal to let these disappearances stay quiet, was part of what kept the case from being buried a second time, this time in paperwork. Multiply her by every family across 3 countries who never got a single answer. That's the actual size of this case. Not the number 300. The number of people who spent years waiting for a phone call that never came. In 1980, Ecuador puts López on trial. The country doesn't have the death penalty. It doesn't even have life imprisonment in the way you'd expect. The maximum sentence Ecuadorian law allows is 16 years. For a man who confessed to hundreds of murders. The number shocks the public far beyond Ecuador's borders. International news picks up the story. People ask the same question over and over. How does a system built for ordinary crime hold someone like this? The court hands down the maximum sentence anyway. 16 years. It will turn out to matter less than anyone expects. López spends over a decade in Ecuadorian custody. Prison staff, at various points, describe him as calm, cooperative, even helpful. In 1994, after roughly 14 years, he's released early. Good behavior. He's deported to Colombia, where he's briefly placed in a psychiatric facility for evaluation rather than a standard prison. And then, in 1998, a Colombian judge rules he can be released entirely. No ankle monitor. No long-term supervision system in place strong enough to track someone like this. Just, release, back into the world he once used to disappear between borders. After 1998, Pedro López disappears. Not the way his victims did. He disappears the way free men do, he simply walks away and stops being watched. There are unconfirmed reports over the years, a sighting here, a rumor there, but nothing solid. No confirmed arrest. No confirmed death. No confirmed location. Somewhere, potentially, a man responsible for hundreds of confirmed and confessed murders may still be alive today, under a different name, in a different life, known to no one around him. Officially, only a portion of López's confessed victims were ever confirmed with recovered remains. The true number, whether it's 50 or 300, may never be fully known. What is known is this: a legal system built for ordinary crimes let one of history's most prolific killers walk free in under 15 years. Somewhere, there are still mothers who never got a grave to stand beside. Still families who never got a name to put to their grief. And somewhere out there, if he's still alive. He's an old man now. Living quietly. While the families of his victims never got the ending they deserved. If this is the kind of story the archive was built to hold on to, there's another file waiting for you right here on the channel.